The little girl was hiccuping from crying so much, so her mother looked at her leg and was startled. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy this. Lindale looked like the kind of town you'd see on a Christmas card. Trees trimmed just right, sidewalks swept clean, and porches draped with bunting even in October. People smiled, they waved, but it was the kind of smile that didn't quite reach the eyes. A little too wide, a little too fixed. Rachel Cooper noticed those things, always had, especially since becoming a nurse, especially since becoming a mother. The air had the cool bite of early fall as Rachel parked in the school pickup line behind a row of identical SUVs. Her little sedan looked tired beside them, but it was dependable, like her. She rolled down the window and leaned out to wave at her daughter. 7-year-old Ellie usually ran to her with that crooked grin and those messy braids bouncing behind her. But today, she wasn't running. Today, she stood near the fence, face turned away, shoulders hunched, small hands clenched into the sides of her sweater. Rachel frowned. Something was off. The whistle blew, signaling the end of the school day, and children rushed out like bees from a jar, laughing, shouting, climbing into waiting cars, all except Ellie. She just stood there. When she finally turned and caught sight of her mother, her little face crumpled. And then came the cry. It wasn't a normal child's cry, not a scraped knee cry. It was the kind of sound that seemed to come from somewhere deeper, a cry that shuddered through her, a cry of terror. Rachel jumped from the car. "Ellie, baby, what is it?" Ellie ran to her, nearly tripping on her own feet. Rachel dropped to her knees, right there on the sidewalk as her daughter collapsed into her arms, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe. Rachel held her tight. "You're okay, sweetheart. Mama's got you. Tell me what happened." But Ellie just shook her head, her face buried against her mother's shoulder. Her body trembled. Rachel carried her to the car, whispering comforts. It wasn't until they were halfway home that Ellie spoke. "My leg hurts," she whispered. Rachel pulled the car over into a quiet lot and turned on the interior light. Ellie hesitated, but then slowly pulled up her pant leg. Rachel's breath caught. There, just above the ankle, was a raw red mark, circular, burned deep. At first, Rachel thought it was a rash, but no, it had shape, a pattern, a spiral. The skin was angry and raised like something pressed in and held too long. "Honey," Rachel whispered, her voice calm despite the storm in her chest. "Who did this to you?" Ellie looked out the window, her face pale. "It happened at recess," she said, eyes far away, "when the lights turned off." "What lights?" Rachel asked, confused, but Ellie just shook her head. Back at home, Rachel ran a lukewarm bath, washed the wound gently, and wrapped it with sterile gauze. She'd seen burns before. She knew the difference between accident and intent. This was no accident. Later that night, she tucked Ellie in, kissed her forehead, and turned on the unicorn nightlight that bathed the room in a soft pink hue. "I love you to the moon and back," and Rachel whispered. Ellie didn't respond. As Rachel stood, her eyes fell on something that made her blood run cold. Along the baseboard of the wall, drawn faintly in pencil, was a spiral, not scribbled, not playful, deliberate. Rachel's hands went cold. The next morning, she returned to Lindale Elementary, walking Ellie to the classroom herself. She smiled politely at the other parents, nodded at the staff, and tried to look like a mother who didn't suspect a thing. But inside, her mind raced. The other kids looked dull, vacant. One girl clutched a stuffed rabbit so tightly the ears were fraying. A boy walked stiffly, his arms tight against his sides. And the teachers, they smiled. Too much. They blinked rarely. And their voices, oddly pleasant, perfectly pitched. "Good morning, Mrs. Cooper," said one. "Isn't it a beautiful day to learn?" Rachel forced a smile. "It's something." She watched as the school doors swallowed up her daughter, and a shiver went down her spine. As she turned to leave, she caught sight of Principal Hastings across the courtyard. Tall, elegant, always dressed in gray. She was crouched beside Ellie, one hand resting on the child's shoulder, and Ellie froze, not in fear, in resignation. As if she knew struggling wouldn't help, Rachel clenched her fists. Something was wrong in Lindale, deeply wrong, and everyone here was pretending not to see it. That night, after Ellie was asleep, Rachel went to her bookshelf and pulled out a notebook. She flipped to a clean page and wrote, "October 3rd, burn mark, spiral, recess." Ellie frozen when touched, everyone smiling too much. She tapped her pen against the paper, listening to the silence of the house. It was too quiet. Not even the refrigerator hummed. It was as if the world were holding its breath. Outside, a dog barked once, then fell silent. Rachel turned off the light and looked once more at the window. The street was empty, but as she stared, she saw something that chilled her to the bone. A figure across the street, not moving, just standing there, in front of a lamppost, wearing a gray coat, watching her window. When she blinked, it was gone. The next day, she brought Ellie to school again. As she parked, she glanced at the other parents. They waved, they smiled. But Rachel noticed something new. Every single one of them, without fail, had a perfect little spiral hanging from their rearview mirror. Not a cross, not an air freshener, just a spiral. And their children? They didn't speak. They didn't run. They just obeyed. Rachel gripped the steering wheel, heart hammering in her chest. What was happening in Lindale? And what in God's name had they done to her? Child. The next morning, Rachel parked further from the school, not in the usual pickup loop, but across the street, behind a line of dormant oak trees. She left the engine running and watched the front of Lindale Elementary like a hawk. She wasn't sure what she was expecting. Actually, no, she was expecting something unnatural, something beneath the perfection of this place, something she had always chalked up to suburban smugness, until now. Ellie sat in the passenger seat, holding her lunchbox with both hands like it might float away if she didn't grip it tightly enough. Rachel glanced over. "How's the leg, honey?" Ellie shrugged, not meeting her eyes. "Better." Rachel reached over, gently brushing a hand over Ellie's soft hair. "Do you remember anything else about what happened?" Ellie was quiet. Then, "It's better if you don't ask." Rachel's hand froze. "Why do you say that? They don't like it." "Who, sweetie?" Ellie turned slowly toward the window. "The ones that smile all the time." Rachel's stomach turned. At exactly 7:45, the front doors of the school opened like clockwork. Teachers stood in perfect pairs on either side of the entrance, waving in children, with their fixed, glassy smiles. It looked like a greeting line at a wedding, too rehearsed, too synchronous. Mrs. Hastings wasn't among them. Rachel scanned for her but found only the smaller, almost identically dressed teachers, every one of them in pastels or muted blues. Their shoes were the same, low and flat, no heels. Their expressions never changed even as the flood of children poured through the doors. She noticed a girl, maybe 9, walking alone, dragging a foot as if injured. Her hand clutched a small teddy bear, matted and dirty. A teacher knelt to speak to her, brushing the bear's head. The girl froze, didn't flinch, didn't cry, just froze. Rachel turned to Ellie. "I'll walk you in today." Ellie hesitated. "They'll see." "Let them." She took her daughter's hand, and they crossed the street. Rachel kept her shoulders back, her steps confident, the way she'd learned to walk down the hospital corridors even when her heart was in shambles. They stepped into the building and the air changed. It wasn't the smell, though that was off too. Bleach, mixed with something faintly floral and fake. It was the way sound seemed dampened. No echoes, no buzzing lights, no chatter. Just a still, sterile hush. A teacher smiled at them. Rachel didn't know her name. She was young, with dimples that didn't quite match her eyes. "Good morning, Eleanor," she said, using Ellie's full name without asking. "Ready to begin your day?" Ellie said nothing. She simply walked toward, her classroom. Rachel watched her shoulders, tense, squared. She didn't skip. She didn't run to friends. Rachel turned back to the teacher. "Do you know what happened to my daughter's leg?" The smile didn't falter. "Children fall. It's the nature of play." "I didn't say she fell." The teacher's gaze didn't change. "Have a peaceful day, Mrs. Cooper." Rachel nodded slowly and walked the hall, pretending to check a bulletin board. But her eyes were everywhere. The posters on the walls, the safety signs, the artwork supposedly made by the children. Every single drawing had a spiral somewhere. On a sun, on a shirt, on a balloon. One had nothing but spirals. And then she saw it, a corkboard with photos. Our stars of the month. Each child held a certificate and wore a paper crown. All smiled, or tried to, but some of the smiles were wrong, too wide. One girl's eyes were red, like she'd cried just before the photo. One boy's arms were crossed so tightly, his fists disappeared into his sleeves. Rachel looked up. Another teacher was watching her, not smiling, just watching. Rachel left the school. Back in the car, her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the ignition. She caught her reflection in the rearview mirror, eyes tired, drawn, and she remembered something Ellie had said. "It's better if you don't ask." Rachel drove to the grocery store next, not because she needed anything, but because she needed to be somewhere normal, somewhere with chatter, messiness, spilled coffee, imperfect displays. But Lindale Grocery was too clean, too quiet. The cashier smiled at her with the same smile the teachers had used. She reached for the oranges and stopped. Every single fruit had a sticker. That wasn't unusual, but each sticker had a spiral. She turned to an elderly woman examining cereal boxes nearby. "Do you ever think the people here smile too much?" Rachel asked lightly. The woman blinked. Once, then twice. Her face stayed neutral. "Why would anyone complain about kindness? I just meant people who complain," the woman interrupted, "usually have something to hide." Rachel stepped back, startled. "Excuse me?" The woman smiled. "Enjoy your oranges, dear." Rachel dropped the fruit and left. At home, Ellie sat curled on the couch, watching a cartoon but not reacting to it. "Sweetheart," sweetheart, Rachel said gently. Did something happen at school? Today? Ellie didn't answer. Anything different? Anything strange? Ellie turned and looked her dead in the eyes. They stopped asking me questions. What do you mean? If you don't answer fast enough, they take you to the room. Rachel's mouth went dry. What room? Ellie picked up her pencil and started to draw, not on paper but on the arm of the couch. Her strokes were slow, methodical. A shape began to form, a spiral. Rachel took the pencil away gently. Ellie, I want you to tell me what happens in the room. Her daughter whispered. They sing. That night, Rachel sat with a cup of chamomile tea, but it went cold in her hand. She opened her laptop and started searching. Lindale Elementary, local news, school board, PTA minutes. Nothing odd, not on the surface, just the usual award ceremonies, bake sales, standardized test rankings. But when she typed incidents into the ICE search bar, a strange thing happened. The page blinked, refreshed, and cleared the search. She tried again. Same result. She opened Facebook, searched for Lindale parent groups, found one, scrolled, photo after photo of smiling kids, but not one photo from inside the school. She clicked on a post from a mother named June, something about a fall festival. Harmless. She messaged her. Hi June, I think we met at pickup once. I had a question about something my daughter mentioned. Would you be open to talking? No response. Until 3 hours later. You don't want to make noise here in Lindale. That was all. No greeting, no name, no emoji, just a warning. Rachel stared at the screen, heart pounding. She turned off the laptop, went to Ellie's room and kissed her sleeping forehead. Then she saw something, drawn faintly on the underside of Ellie's pillow, almost invisible in the moonlight. Another spiral, the same size, the same angle. Rachel walked out of the room and into the hallway. She leaned against the wall, eyes closed, trying to breathe. She felt something in her hand, a note, folded neatly, not there before. She opened it slowly, dread tightening her chest. Just 5 words, written in perfect uniform cursive. We see you, Rachel Cooper. The kitchen clock ticked loud in the stillness of 3:17 a.m. Rachel Cooper sat at the kitchen table in an old sweatshirt, her coffee cold, a pen clenched between her fingers. Ellie had been asleep for hours, but Rachel hadn't even tried. The note was still on the counter beside the toaster. We see you, Rachel Cooper. Clean handwriting, no envelope, no fingerprints. She'd locked every door, closed every blind, but somehow that paper had made its way inside her house, into her hand. She knew what most people would say, that she was tired, that her nurse shifts were catching up with her, that she was imagining things. But they hadn't seen the burn on Ellie's leg, or the spiral under her pillow, or the children who no longer ran. She opened her old nursing binder, the one she used back when she worked long nights in pediatrics, and began a log. Observed behavior in Ellie, week 1. Burn mark, spiral pattern, whispered reference to the room, increased drawing of spiral motifs, emotional detachment at school, sudden stillness when touched by staff, flat affect paranoia, fear of being overheard. Then she flipped to our clean page. Unusual occurrences, identical behavior in other children, teachers and staff smile constantly, drawing of spiral present in hallway decor, message left in house without forced entry, online searches about school malfunctioning or blocked. She wrote with clinical detachment, like she was documenting a case, because maybe that was the only way she could stop from spiraling herself. You don't want to make noise here in Lindale. June's message echoed again in her mind. Rachel hadn't responded. Not yet, but she would. She needed more. So that morning she dropped Ellie at school, with a kiss and a wave, the smile on her face brittle as porcelain, and instead of driving away, she parked behind the old maintenance shed across the street. From there she watched. Within 10 minutes, she counted 5 children walking into school wearing long sleeves, even though it was 80 degrees. One had a limp. One walked with his arms wrapped around his torso. At 9 a.m. sharp, she returned home and opened the printed school schedule Ellie had brought home on the first day. Tuesday PE. Ellie hadn't worn gym clothes. No one had told her to. In fact, Rachel hadn't seen any of the, children with backpacks lately. Not a single one. She opened her daughter's bag, just a snack container. A folder labeled, behavior tracking. Empty. Nothing else. She flipped through old calendars and began cross-referencing dates. The night Ellie had woken up screaming, September 19th. She circled it. The day she said the light turned off, September 27th. She circled again. Then she paused. Every incident, every emotional spiral, every burn or silence followed a pattern. 8 days apart, like clockwork, something cyclical. And that wasn't all. Rachel noticed the handwriting on every note Ellie brought home. Perfect cursive. The same letters, same spacing. Whether it was reminder, parent meeting, or don't forget Friday reading day, the hand never changed. She tested her theory, pulled out a bill, a bank statement, a card from Ellie's old kindergarten kindergarten teacher. All different, natural. Then she opened her laptop and typed Lindale Elementary Principal handwriting. Nothing. She typed Mrs. Hastings handwriting. Nothing. Every document from the school was typed or digitally printed, except the notes. Rachel exhaled slowly, rubbing her temples. Then the phone rang. Unknown number. She stared at it. It rang once more, then stopped. A new text arrived. Stop asking questions. This is your final warning. Rachel didn't respond. She put her phone in the drawer and took out a pen and a fresh notebook. Not the clinical one, but an old spiral-bound notepad from her college days. She wrote 3 names across the top. Ellie June Hastings. She drew lines between them, adding small notes. Ellie, behavior change, spiral burn, fear, June, cryptic message, avoids follow-up Hastings, control, presence during key moments, perfect composure. Then she added a question. What happens every 8 days? That afternoon, as she waited for Ellie outside school, Rachel watched the other parents. They were laughing, chatting about soccer schedules and PTO fundraisers. One woman, in pearls and red lipstick, turned to her. You look tired, dear. Everything all day, right? Rachel smiled tightly. Just long hours. The woman tilted her head. You know, my husband always says tiredness makes people paranoid. You should rest. Then she walked away. Rachel didn't move. Her heart was pounding. Ellie emerged a moment later, eyes down, clutching a folded sheet of paper. Rachel took it from her gently. Inside, in perfect handwriting, Ellie Cooper, red behavior level, next session required. Rachel blinked. Sweetheart, she said, voice calm. What's a session? Ellie's lip trembled. It's like when they take you away from the others to learn to behave better. Who takes you? They wear gray. You don't look at their eyes. Rachel's grip tightened on the note. That night, she emailed June. I don't want to make noise. I want to know how to protect my daughter. Please help me understand what's happening. No response. Until 2 a.m. Check your daughter's school folder tomorrow. You'll find the pattern. Rachel didn't sleep. She didn't dream. The next morning, after Ellie left, Rachel opened the folder again. Tucked in the back was a printed calendar. No header, just dates. Some were bolded. All of them fell exactly 8 days apart. The next one? Tomorrow. She circled it in red. Then she noticed the final line at the bottom of the page. Next realignment, October 11th. Consent assumed. Consent? Rachel's blood ran cold. She knew she couldn't wait anymore. She picked up her phone, opened her messages, and this time she wasn't texting June. She was calling someone else. Someone she hadn't spoken to in years. Her brother, a retired cyber investigator who owed her one. The line rang. Rachel? A sleepy voice answered. It's me, she said. I need your help. It's about Ellie, and a school that's not really a school. There was a pause. What are you talking about? I think my daughter's being trained, Rachel whispered. Reprogrammed. The silence on the other end stretched long. Then, I'm coming. Don't say anything else over the phone. Rachel ended the call. She turned off the lights, closed the blinds, and sat at the Kaidabao table, staring at the words again. Consent assumed. She would burn this place to the ground before she gave it. The waiting area outside Principal Hastings' office was covered in soft green carpet, and the faint scent of lavender diffused from a plug-in on the far wall. Everything was peaceful. Still. Too still. Rachel sat rigid in one of the plush chairs, Ellie's spiral-marked behavior report burning a hole in her purse. A laminated sign above the secretary's desk read, Positive posture, positive mind, in cheerful rainbow letters. Behind the desk, the secretary, a woman with salt and pepper curls and a face like porcelain, tapped on a keyboard with meticulous, almost mechanical precision. She hadn't looked up once since Rachel arrived. A soft chime rang out. Principal Hastings will see you now, she said, still not looking. Rachel rose and walked across the plush carpet to the oversized mahogany door. It opened before she knocked. Mrs. Hastings stood behind it, smiling, the same way she always did. Her gray suit matched the stormy sky outside. Her silver hair was coiled tightly into a bun, not a strand out of place. Mrs. Cooper, she said, her voice smooth and melodic. Thank you for coming. Rachel stepped inside, immediately struck by how sterile the office felt. The furniture was expensive, leather, dark wood, and a shelf lined with plaques of Community Excellence Awards. But the walls were blank, save for one framed quote, a harmonious child, a happy child. Mrs. Hastings motioned to a chair. Please sit. Rachel lowered herself into the seat. You wanted to speak about Ellie? Actually, Hastings said, folding her hands over a leather-bound planner. You did. I believe you requested this meeting. Rachel blinked. No, I didn't. You left a voicemail last night, Hastings interrupted gently. Around 2:07 a.m. sounded like you were quite distressed. Rachel's heart dropped. She hadn't called anyone last night, only her brother, and not from this phone. Hastings opened her planner. I transcribed the call, if it helps jog your memory. Rachel's hands turned clammy. Hastings flipped to a page and read, "They're hurting my daughter. They're burning her. Something's happening in that school, in the walls, in the dark. I'm scared. I'm so scared." Rachel's breath caught. That wasn't her voice. She hadn't said that. "Mrs. Hastings, I never—" The principal closed the planner. "It's not uncommon," she said with a tone of warm pity, "for young mothers, especially single mothers, to experience overwhelming emotions, the responsibility, the sleepless nights, old trauma rising." She leaned forward, eyes bright but unreadable. "Especially when their child is sensitive." Rachel stiffened. "My daughter isn't sensitive. She's scared. Something is wrong, and no one's explaining why she came home with a burn on her leg. Ah, yes, the spiral." Hastings smiled again, so pleasantly that it made Rachel's skin crawl. "Children are creative, imaginative. They play, they trip, they see monsters under the bed." Rachel stood. "I know what a contact burn looks like. I'm a nurse." Hastings didn't flinch. "Are you working currently?" Rachel paused. "No." Hastings clicked her pen. "And is there anyone else in the household besides you and Ellie?" "No." "No husband, no partner, no consistent child care provider?" "No." "Interesting," Hastings murmured. "What are you doing?" Rachel asked. "Building a case to discredit me?" "I'm merely documenting," Hastings replied, her voice never rising. "Ellie has shown behavioral irregularities, withdrawal, disassociation. We believe she may be struggling with impulse regulation and possibly she's afraid to speak." Rachel's voice cracked. "She draws spirals on the wall. She whispers about a room where no one sings unless the lights go out. What the hell are you, doing in this building?" A beat of silence. Then Hastings rose, slowly, deliberately, and walked to the window behind her desk. "Do you know how long I've been in education, Mrs. Cooper?" Rachel didn't answer. 37 years, and I've seen the way the world chews up children and spits them more out. We don't do that here in Lindale. We nurture, we recalibrate, we create balance. By burning them, Hastings turned, her face unreadable. By guiding them, molding the noise into music. Rachel stepped back, hands clenched. "I'm going to the school board." "They are the school board," Hastings replied as if delivering a bedtime fact. "Every one of them. Their children were shaped here. Their grandchildren will be too." The room felt colder now. Rachel swallowed. "I'll go to the police." Hastings walked back to her desk, lifted a file folder and opened it. Inside was a photo. Ellie, standing alone in the hallway, face neutral. A timestamp in the corner. Yesterday, there was another photo and another. Ellie sitting outside during recess, drawing something in the dirt. And one more. Ellie looking into the camera, her eyes wide, her mouth open like she'd just said something. Rachel stared in horror. "These were taken without my consent," she whispered. "You gave consent," Hastings said, tapping the calendar Rachel had found in Ellie's folder. "Consent assumed, per behavioral agreement clause. It's all there." Rachel lunged across the desk, snatching the file. Hastings didn't stop her. She just smiled. "You may want to read the margin notes." Rachel froze. There, scrawled lightly in pencil at the bottom of each form, was the same looped signature. Not Hastings, just a symbol, a spiral. She dropped the folder like it burned her. "I'm done here," she said, her voice shaking. "As you wish," Hastings replied. "But I'll remind you, excessive agitation can be interpreted as psychological instability, and we do have the authority to recommend temporary parental oversight suspension if a child's well-being is believed to be compromised." Rachel turned back, furious. "You're threatening to take my daughter away from me? I'm giving you time to rest," Hastings said softly, "which might be exactly what you need." Rachel left the office without another word. Outside, the sun had dipped behind a thin veil of clouds. She didn't go home. She didn't call her brother. She drove to the small bookstore on Main Street, one with peeling paint and a bell above the door. Inside, she bought a journal with a lock, a real one, not digital. She paid in cash. She sat in her car, parked behind the alley, and began to write. They know. They're watching. And they're ready to come for her. She's not safe in that building, neither am I. But what Hastings doesn't know is that I'm not alone anymore. She thinks I'm just a tired single mom. She's wrong. I'm a mother, and they picked the wrong child. The next morning, Rachel received a voicemail. It was from the Department of Child Welfare. A social worker wanted to schedule a wellness visit. Rachel's hands trembled as she ended the call. Hastings wasn't just smiling anymore. She was moving her pieces. It started with the sound of scratching, not loud, just faint, like a pencil dragged gently across a wall. Rachel stirred from the light doze she'd fallen into on the couch. Her neck ached and the clock on the microwave blinked 2:12 a.m. She sat up slowly. The house was still, but the sound continued. Scratch, pause, not Not steady, not rhythmic. It was the hesitant stop and start pattern of a child, unsure if they were allowed to do what they were doing. Rachel rose and moved down the hallway, her bare feet silent on the floor. The sound grew clearer as she approached Ellie's room. She opened the door softly. There, in the dim glow of the unicorn nightlight, was her daughter, crouched on the floor, her back to the door, pencil in hand. She was drawing on the wall. Rachel's breath caught. Ellie, sweetheart. The pencil stopped. Ellie froze, like she'd been caught in the middle of a crime. Slowly she turned, her small face pale in the lavender light. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't want to forget. Rachel stepped into the room, crouching down beside her. Forget what, baby? Ellie moved aside, not with fear, but with something close to desperation. She wanted her mother to see. On the wall was a drawing, done entirely in black pencil. It stretched from the floor up to Ellie's shoulder, maybe 3 feet high. It was a room, not a real one. Not any room Rachel recognized, but clearly a room, square, windowless, lined with thick black lines that looked like walls or maybe padding. In the center were stick figures, tiny, trapped, all drawn smaller than Ellie's usual people, and around them, larger shapes, adult-sized figures, but not smiling. Their faces were blank, their heads, round spirals. Above them, Ellie had written in block letters, "They sing when the light goes out." Rachel stared, her heart pounding. "Who are they?" she whispered. Ellie didn't answer. Instead, she pointed to a small symbol in the bottom corner of the drawing. Rachel leaned closer. It was a spiral, but not like the ones Ellie had drawn before. This one was burned into the paint, carved deep and angry into the drywall, like someone had pressed a hot wire or branding iron into the surface. Rachel touched it. It was real. She pulled her hand back, eyes wide. "Did you do this?" Ellie shook her head. "It was already there." Rachel turned toward her daughter. "Ellie, I need you to tell me the truth. Where did you see this room?" Ellie looked down at her. Her small fingers twisted together. "They took me there," she said. "The first day I didn't smile enough." Rachel swallowed hard. "Who took you?" Ellie's voice was barely audible. "The gray ones." Rachel felt the room tilt for a moment, her vision narrowing. She pulled Ellie into her lap and held her tight, rocking gently. "You're safe now," she whispered. But it was a lie. She knew it. Ellie knew it. The next morning, Rachel photographed the drawing on the wall, including the brand mark. She then painted over it, not to erase, but to hide, to protect. She packed Ellie's lunch, added her favorite juice box, and drove her to school. But instead of driving off after drop-off, Rachel waited until all the kids had gone inside. Then she parked around the corner and walked, quietly, carefully, along the side of the building. She wasn't looking for classrooms. She was looking for that room. Ellie had drawn it carefully, and Rachel had memorized the layout. No windows, thick walls, a square space where there shouldn't be one. It was near the east side of the school, just beyond the gym. She found the wall, exactly where Ellie had drawn it. Flat, smooth, no windows, no doors. No, but a small pipe jutted from the brick, and beneath it, Rachel noticed a slight discoloration, a faint black line, like a seam, a hidden door. She bent low and pressed her ear against the brick. Silence. Then, faint, muffled, a soft hum, music, children's voices, singing. Rachel reeled back. Her phone rang, loud in the silence, and she nearly screamed. She answered quickly, her hands trembling. "Hello? Mrs. Cooper?" a woman's voice asked. "This is Principal Hastings' office. We'd like to schedule a brief parent consultation this afternoon if you're available." Rachel swallowed. "About Ellie?" "Yes," the woman said, her voice syrupy. "We just want to ensure her experience remains harmonious." Rachel's grip tightened on the phone. "Sure, I'll be there." After the call, she snapped a photo of the wall, the pipe, and the faint seam. Then she walked around the building and returned to her car. That afternoon, she entered the school through the front again, smiling politely, pretending all was well. Inside Hastings's office, the air was even colder than last time. "Mrs. Cooper," Hastings said, hands folded neatly on the desk. "We've noticed some instability in Ellie's routine." "She's 7, Rachel said flatly. "Instability is normal." Hastings gave a measured smile. "Of course, but some behaviors are disruptive." She slid a piece of paper across the desk. Another report. Eleanor Cooper, disassociated during group circle, repeatedly drew forbidden imagery. "Required redirection." Rachel read the words, then looked up. "Forbidden imagery?" Hastings tapped the the page with a manicured finger. The spiral. It's not part of our curriculum. It's not part of any curriculum, Rachel snapped. And yet she continues to draw it. Over and over. Rachel leaned forward. If you think that drawing is the problem, you're not paying attention. Hastings' smile didn't waver. On the contrary, Mrs. Cooper, we pay attention to everything. That night, Rachel and Ellie ate dinner in silence. Rachel didn't ask about school. She waited. And finally, Ellie said, "They said if I talk too much, they'll take you away." Rachel's fork clattered to her plate. "I'm sorry," Ellie said, shrinking back. "I didn't mean to make it worse." Rachel reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. "Sweetheart, nothing you say could make it worse. I want you to talk. I need you to. You hear me?" Ellie nodded, her lips trembling. That night, Rachel locked every door, every window, and then she opened her closet, pulled down the old lockbox she hadn't opened in a decade, and retrieved something she'd never thought she'd need again. Her hospital-grade camera. She charged the batteries, checked the night vision function, and packed it in her bag. Because if the school wanted to gaslight her, lie to her, and erase what they were doing, she was going to record them, not just for her, but for every child with spirals under their skin. The pediatrician's office. Lindale was decorated with jungle animals, cotton clouds hanging from the ceiling, and rows of cheerful books no one ever touched. The kind of place built to distract or pacify. Rachel sat in a cold vinyl chair, Ellie on the exam table in her favorite hoodie, legs swinging just above the tile. Dr. Lasky, the town's long-standing family doctor, entered with a smile too large for the small room. He was kind. That's what everyone said. But Rachel no longer trusted smiles. "Well now," he said, looking at Ellie's chart, "let's take a peek at that leg, Ellie didn't speak. She pulled up her pant leg with slow, reluctant fingers. Dr. Lasky crouched and examined the skin carefully. The burn was healing, but still angry and red. The spiral unmistakable. "Interesting," he said lightly. "Almost looks like a reaction pattern. Could be contact dermatitis or stress-induced dermatitis. Perhaps. Has she been anxious lately?" Rachel stared. "That's not a rash, doctor. That's a scar, a burn. Someone pressed something into her skin." Dr. Lasky stood, removing his gloves. "Kids are more resilient than we think. They invent things to make sense of their feelings. And when the world feels big and scary, well, sometimes they act out physically." Rachel's voice sharpened. "Are you saying she did that to herself?" "I'm saying children are mysterious," he replied calmly. "I'll note it, but unless she discloses specific abuse, and unless I have reason to believe she's in immediate danger, we don't intervene. You know that, Rachel." She did know. Mandated reporter rules, policies, protocol, but she also knew the smell of burned flesh. She dressed wounds like it, heard the screams in ER rooms that never leave you. "I want a referral," Rachel said firmly, "to a child trauma specialist. Out of county." Dr. Lasky hesitated. "I don't think that's necessary. Lindale's services are quite out of county." He met her gaze, then sighed, scribbled something on his pad, and tore it off. "Here's a number. They're about 40 minutes east." Rachel snatched the slip. As she left, Ellie took her hand, small fingers curling around her palm. Outside, the air was thick with humidity, summer refusing to give in to fall. Rachel opened the car, helped Ellie in, then turned back toward the building, and paused. One of the nurses, a redhead named Megan, was standing at the window, watching them. Still, Rachel waved. Megan didn't wave back. That afternoon, she drove straight to the Lindale Police Department. The front desk officer looked up from his screen as Rachel entered. He was young, late 20s maybe, with a buzz cut and a badge that seemed too shiny to have seen anything real. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "Yes," Rachel said, producing photos from her folder. "This is my daughter. She came home from school with a spiral burned into her leg. I believe it happened on school grounds." The officer studied the photos, blinked. "That's a weird shape." "Not a shape," Rachel said, her voice firm. "A brand." "Did she say who did it?" "She said it happened at recess. That's all she'll say." "She's scared." He nodded slowly. "And do you have reason to believe someone at the school?" "Yes." He tapped a few keys. "Okay, I'll log the complaint." "Just log it?" Rachel asked, incredulous. "That's it? Until there's more, I have more." She pulled the behavior reports, the drawing, even a flash drive containing the audio recording she'd captured through Ellie's baby monitor. The whispered sentence, "They sing when the light goes out." He inserted the flash drive into his machine, listened, expression unchanged. "I'll add it to the file," he said after a long pause. "A detective might follow up if something surfaces." "If something surfaces?" Rachel snapped. "What exactly has to happen, officer? A broken bone? A body?" "Ma'am, I understand. You're upset." "No, you don't," she growled. "My daughter is coming home with scars and silences, and all you people in this town just keep smiling like the world's perfect." He stood a little straighter. her, something shifting in his eyes. "Be careful what you say about this town, Mrs. Cooper. Folks around here take pride in keeping things orderly." Rachel took a step back, icy realization flooding through her. There was no help here. Not from the doctors, not from the police. She left the building without another word. As she reached her car, she felt it. That tickle on the back of the that knowing. She turned slowly. Across the street in front of the old county courthouse, a man in a gray suit leaned against a lamppost, flipping through a notepad. He didn't look up, didn't need to. He was watching her just the same. She drove home in silence, her mind racing. When she reached the house, there was a piece of paper tucked into the storm door. Typed, "No return address. Your behavior has been noted. Continued disruption will result in escalated interventions." At the bottom, a perfect spiral. Rachel tore it in half. Then she heard a car engine purr behind her. She turned. A white sedan slowly passed in front of her house. No license plate. Inside, a child was pressed against the glass window in the back seat. A girl, hair in tight curls, a face pale and empty, their eyes locked for just 1 second. And Rachel knew that girl was part of it, taken, still in, still. Then screaming silently through the glass, the car turned the corner and disappeared. That night, Rachel sat on the floor of her laundry room, the only place she felt hidden from the windows. She held Ellie close and whispered, "They know I see, and they're not hiding anymore." Ellie looked up at her. "The other girl," she said. "She's still in there, the one they left alone." Rachel blinked. "What girl?" Ellie reached for a pen and paper and drew a child, hair curly, eyes sewn shut. "Her name is Alice," Ellie whispered. She saw everything. The darkness outside Rachel's house pressed against the windows like a rising tide. Inside, the glow of a single lamp lit the living room, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. She couldn't sleep, not after Ellie's drawing, not after the way her daughter had whispered, "Her name is Alice." It was the first time Ellie had given a name, a witness. Rachel sat curled on the couch, Ellie tucked under a blanket nearby. She stared at the drawing, a girl with tight curls, small and frail, with stitches over her eyes. The lines were jagged, like Ellie's hand had trembled. Ellie had fallen asleep right after, but Rachel couldn't look away, not just because of what Ellie said, but because Rachel had seen her, the girl in the car, the one who looked back at her through the glass, not crying, not screaming, just there, silent, watching, as if asking for help in the only way she could. Rachel traced the name Ellie had written, under the figure, Alice. The letters were blocky, childlike, but what chilled her was something else. In the corner of the drawing, just under Alice's shoes, Ellie had drawn a small door, a square, barely noticeable, and inside the door, a spiral, that same sickening spiral that was everywhere now. Rachel got up and pulled down the old photo box from the hallway closet, the one labeled before Ellie, before the divorce, before Lindale. She flipped through the pictures, searching for something she hadn't realized she was missing, her own childhood. There were only a few photos. Her mother hadn't taken many. Most were stiff portraits, her hair brushed back, standing in front of dull wallpaper. But there was one picture, taken by her aunt, Rachel thought, that gave her pause. It was from a birthday party, maybe 3rd grade, a small cake, balloons, and 4 kids standing together. Rachel, a boy named Brian she vaguely remembered, a girl with curly hair. Rachel stared. The girl had her arm around her, smiling wide. Not the eerie smiles from Lindale, a real one, free, untamed. Her name was, her breath caught, Alice, her Alice. They'd been in school together, briefly, and then one day Alice had just stopped coming. Her mother had said the family moved or something like that, but Rachel remembered. The truth was, Alice hadn't moved. She'd disappeared. She flipped the photo over. No date, just one thing written in faint blue ink. Harmony Day, District G. Rachel felt the floor tilt beneath her. Harmony. The same word Hastings had used. The same word from the documents Mr. Donovan would later reveal to her. But now it had surfaced in her own past. She stared at the photo until her hands began to tremble. Because if Alice was part of this, then so was Rachel. She stepped outside for air. The night was still, the wind carrying the scent of fallen leaves and something else. Something metallic, faintly antiseptic, like the hallway of a hospital no one talked about. She walked down the driveway in her robe, breathing deep, trying to quiet the storm in her chest. That's when she noticed the mail slot. It wasn't a normal mail day, but the brass flap hung slightly open. Rachel pulled a small envelope from the slot, unmarked, sealed. She opened it carefully. Inside was a photo of her, standing outside the police station 2 days ago. Underneath, in a neat typewritten font, "You've been here before." That's all it said. But her knees buckled just the same. The next morning, Rachel returned to her journal. She drew the spiral, again and again, trying to recall where she'd first seen it. Not in Lindale, all. Not recently, long before. She remembered a hallway, fluorescent lights flickering, a windowless room, a voice, male, calm, professional, saying, "Now, Rachel, what do we say when we're frightened?" And her own voice, young and small, whispering, "We sing until the lights come back." She gasped and dropped the pen. How had she forgotten that? It wasn't just Ellie who was trapped. It wasn't just Alice. They had done it before. To her, and it hadn't worked. Because she'd forgotten, until now. She grabbed her phone and dialed her brother again. He picked up on the second ring. "Rachel, I need you to pull records," she said, her voice shaking. "From when I was a child, from my school, my doctor, especially any that say harmony." He paused. "Rach, you know that stuff's sealed. I don't care. Break whatever law you need to. I just need to know if they did this to me too." "Why now? What happened?" She looked over at Ellie, still asleep on the couch, and said quietly, "Because it never stopped." That night, Rachel pulled out every box from the attic, digging, searching. She found it in the last one, a file folder marked Therapy 1991. Inside, drawings, her drawings. She turned them over one by one. Scribbles, shapes, faces. Then, her breath caught. A spiral drawn over, and next to it, a small figure, eyes sewn shut. Alice. The doorbell rang. Rachel froze. She checked the time. 9:42 p.m. Too late for deliveries. Too early for trouble. She looked through the peephole. No one. But there was something on the mat. She opened the door slowly. It was a child's shoe. Small, dirty, faded pink canvas. The same kind Ellie wore. Inside, tucked into the heel, was a piece of paper, folded tight. She opened it. "Room 9 is still open. She remembers you." Rachel backed into the house, locked the door, and pressed her hands to her mouth to stop the scream. Because the handwriting, it was her own. From when she was 7. Rachel stared at the paper in her hand. Her own handwriting, unmistakably childish, curled into the jagged scrawl of a second-grade pencil grip. Her fingers trembled. "Room 9 is still open. She remembers you." Her childhood self had written this recently. But how? The pink shoe lay on the doormat like a tiny discarded warning. The kind of shoe you don't lose unless someone takes it off you. She brought it inside and examined it under the kitchen light. There was dried mud on the sole, a faint scuff on the toe, and, faint but clear, the letter A written on the inside tag in black marker. Alice. It had to be. Rachel didn't sleep that night. She lay on the couch next to Ellie, watching the hallway, waiting for any sound, any shadow. Her daughter slept deeply, her chest rising and falling, a crayon still clutched in one small hand. By morning, Rachel was back on her feet, running on caffeine and fury. She didn't take Ellie to school. She called the front office and said her daughter had a fever. There was a pause on the line before. The secretary answered, "We'll make note of it." That was all. No concern, no offer to send missed work. Just that. Rachel spent the morning combing through the Harmony file she'd unearthed from the attic. Her brother hadn't called back yet, but she was done waiting on other people to care. Inside, the old folder were sketches, counseling notes, and one sheet clipped to the back labeled Session 4, Behavioral Recitation. It contained a script. Counselor. "And what do we do when the noise is too big?" Child. "We breathe. We listen. We close the door." Counselor. "And if they cry?" Child. "We do not hear it." Counselor. "And when the light goes out?" Child. "We sing." Rachel dropped the paper like it had burned her. That exact phrase. "We sing when the light goes out." Her daughter had said that, drawn that, and Rachel had said it too. Decades earlier, she wasn't just dealing with a school, cult, or a twisted disciplinary system. She was dealing with a program, a design, repeated, sustained, recycled. They'd done it before, and now they were doing it again, to a new generation, to her daughter, to Alice. That afternoon, Rachel visited the school alone. She didn't use the front doors. She parked 3 blocks away, disguised her appearance, old sunglasses, a baseball cap pulled low, and entered through the west side playground fence, where the latch never closed properly. She had a plan. She was looking for room 9, the one they'd kept hidden, the one that remembered her. The corridors were quiet. Afternoon recess. She slipped inside the maintenance corridor near the cafeteria, the one she'd seen janitors use before. It smelled of bleach and copper. Down the hall, a single room stood at the end. No label, no windows, just a bronze doorknob and a keypad. She approached slowly. Room 9. She was sure of it. She reached for the knob. Before she could touch it, a voice echoed behind her. "You're not supposed to be here." Rachel spun. A boy, 12, maybe 13, skinny, pale, wearing a school sweatshirt too large for his frame. He looked at her like he was seeing a ghost. "Who are you?" she asked, breath catching. He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped forward and slipped something into her coat pocket. Then he whispered, "Run." Rachel didn't wait. She ran. Back home, she locked the doors, shut the blinds, and pulled the object from her pocket. A flash drive, unmarked. She plugged it into her laptop and opened the single video file. A grainy, dimly lit room appeared. Sterile walls, no windows, a faint green glow. Room 9. In the center, a child sitting on a chair, not tied, just sitting, still, too still. The camera zoomed slowly toward the child's face, and Rachel gasped. It was Alice, older than the drawing, but not much and very much alive, staring straight into the lens, her mouth unmoving, her eyes blank. Then, the lights dimmed, and the hum began, a low tonal vibration, mechanical and eerie. Alice opened her mouth and began to sing. The melody was haunting, repetitive, hollow, each note slow and robotic as if her voice had been trained out of emotion. And then, in the back of the room, two figures appeared, not teachers, not staff, men, tall, in gray coats, faces blurred. They walked in sync. No words, just observation. Alice kept singing. Rachel shut the laptop and nearly retched into the kitchen sink. She scrubbed her face, her hands, her arms, trying to scrub off the weight of it all. It wasn't just abuse, it was conditioning, a system built not to harm, but to erase. Erase self, erase sound, erase resistance. Ellie came in from the backyard, mud on her shoes. Rachel grabbed her and held her so tight Ellie yelped. "Mommy, I'm sorry," Rachel whispered. I needed to feel you." That night she sat Ellie down gently on the couch. "I need to ask you something important, okay?" Ellie nodded, her braid falling over her shoulder. "Do you know a place called Room 9? Ellie stiffened. She didn't speak, she didn't blink. Rachel's voice trembled. "Baby, please, I need you to tell me what happens there." Ellie looked down. "They watch you, and they wait for you to stop being loud, and when you're quiet, long enough they say you're ready." "Ready for what?" Ellie looked up, and for the first time Rachel saw her eyes go completely flat. "To forget." Rachel choked back a sob. "And Alice?" "She didn't forget," Ellie whispered. "So they left her there." At 11:45 that night, Rachel received a knock at the door. She looked through the peephole. No one, but on the ground was a single sheet of paper, typed. "Your child has been reassigned to remote learning status. All district contact has been suspended pending psychological evaluation of the household." At the bottom, the seal of Lindale Unified School District and a signature, Principal Margaret Hastings, in her hand. A perfect spiral. Rachel held the paper close to her chest, then walked to Ellie's room. She wasn't in bed. The window was open, and on the pillow was a single note, 5 words, written in Ellie's hand. "They came when you slept." Rachel screamed so hard it cracked the quiet of the neighborhood. "Ellie!" She ran through the house barefoot, every door flung open, every light switched on. The garage, the basement, closets, shower, pantry, nothing, not even a whisper. Back in Ellie's room, Rachel stood frozen, staring at the note on the pillow. "They came when you slept," written in pink crayon, neatly, too neatly. Rachel grabbed her phone, fingers trembling, and called the police. The line rang, and rang, and rang. Then, a click. "Lindale Dispatch," a calm voice answered. "How may I direct your call?" "My daughter's missing. Her name is Ellie Cooper. She was taken from our home tonight. Can you confirm your address?" Rachel rattled it off. Another pause. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Our records show the child associated with that address has been reassigned for district care. This is not classified as a missing persons report." Rachel blinked. What? "Per school documentation, your child is in the custody of Lindale District Family Services. That is not a criminal matter. You're saying they took her and you won't even send someone?" "I'm sorry, ma'am. You'll need to address your concerns with the district directly." The line went dead. Rachel stood there, the receiver still pressed to her ear. A weight crushed her chest, her lungs, her bones. She had no help, no backup, and now, no child. She collapsed on the bed and sobbed into Ellie's blanket, breathing in the faint scent of strawberry, shampoo. But then her eyes caught something. The corner of a sheet of paper, half tucked under Ellie's dresser. She crawled over, pulled it out. Another drawing. This one was different. It was a blueprint, a floor plan. She recognized the hallways, the cafeteria, the central courtyard. But there, in the far corner of the drawing, was a space that didn't appear on any official school map Rachel had ever seen. No label, no doors, just a black box. Ellie had drawn arrows leading to that box, through vents, tunnels, narrow paths. At the bottom, she'd written in thick letters, "The Room." With no windows, Rachel sat on the floor, her breath shaky. Ellie had known this might happen. She had planned for it. This drawing wasn't just a cry for help, it was a map. Rachel threw on jeans, laced her boots, packed the drawing and the flash drive from the boy in her coat pocket, and grabbed the camera she'd charged 2 nights earlier. And then she went to the garage, opened a cabinet that had been locked for years. Inside, wrapped in an old winter blanket, was her father father's crowbar, heavy, cold, solid. She tucked it under her coat and drove. The school was dark, only the emergency exit. Signs glowed red through the glass. The air was damp and full of that thick, unnatural stillness, like the ground itself was holding its breath. Rachel parked 2 blocks down and walked the rest of the way, her hood up. She found the grate Ellie had marked on the map behind the gymnasium, unscrewed, loosened, almost like someone had made sure she could get in. The crawl space smelled of rust and mildew. Rachel used her phone light to guide her way, pushing through the tight channel until she reached the first junction. She paused, checked Ellie's map, left, then down, then under. She followed the path exactly. It led to a hatch, metal, old, barely bolted. Rachel yanked. It gave with a groan that made her teeth ache. She slipped through and found herself in a sub-basement hallway. No lights, no signs, just concrete, pipes, and something worse than silence. Humming, faint, mechanical, like the sound Ellie had mimicked. Rachel followed it, each step louder than the last. Then she saw it. A door, no number, no handle, just a keypad. Rachel froze, and then another noise. Footsteps. Someone was coming. She ducked into the shadows and held her breath. The figure walked. Past. Gray coat, clipboard, earpiece. Didn't look left or right, just marched. Rachel waited, then crept forward. The keypad was old. Manual override possible. She took out the crowbar. Thunk. Metal groaned. Thunk. Something inside gave. The door creaked open. Inside, the room was ice cold. Fluorescent lights buzzed above, and in the center, rows of desks. Small, metal, each with a headrest, each with headphones attached to a central monitor, each with a child, silent, eyes open, not blinking, mouths moving, barely. Rachel stepped forward, hand over her mouth. Then she saw her, Ellie, in the second row, wearing the hoodie she'd gone to sleep in, eyes open, mouth slowly repeating a phrase over and over. Rachel ran to her, pulled the headphones off, shook her gently. Ellie, baby, it's Mama. Wake up, please. Ellie blinked. Twice. Her mouth moved, but the words that came out weren't hers. Sing when the light goes out. Sing when the light goes out. No, no, no. Rachel held her tight. It's me. You don't have to sing. You don't have to do anything. Just come back. Please come back. A shudder passed through Ellie's body. Then, a blink, a breath, her head dropped into her head, Rachel's shoulder. Mama, she whispered. Rachel wept. I'm here, baby, I'm here. But then, alarms. A flashing red light. Doors slamming shut behind her. A voice over the intercom. Security breach. Extraction in progress. Hold protocol initiated. Rachel looked around. No exits, no windows, just children, and the spiral emblem glowing red on the monitor. She grabbed Ellie and ran to the desk where the cables connected, yanked them loose. Sparks, screams. Ellie flinched. Other children stirred. Some began to cry. Others just stared. Rachel turned back toward the main door. It was locked. She checked Ellie's map again. There had to be another way. In the corner of the room, a vent. Just like on the map. She ran, kicked the panel in, boosted Ellie through, then climbed in after her. Behind them, the sound of boots pounding the floor. Rachel pushed Ellie forward. They crawled, fast, dirty, through the ductwork until moonlight appeared up ahead. An exterior grate. Rachel kicked it open and tumbled out into the night with Ellie in her arms. They ran until her legs gave out, collapsed behind an abandoned hardware store, hearts pounding, lungs screaming. Rachel looked down. Ellie was awake, blinking, breathing, alive, and on her hand, written in Sharpie, they let me draw the map. The morning came heavy with fog. Rachel sat on a splintered bench outside the old Lyndale train depot, wrapped in a stolen blanket, Ellie asleep across her lap. Her daughter's breath was soft, again slow and even, but her eyes, even when they opened, were elsewhere. She hadn't spoken since they crawled from the ducks. She just held on to Rachel's arm, like a shipwrecked survivor gripping driftwood. Rachel ran a hand through Ellie's hair and stared at the far end of the lot, waiting for a shadow. He came at 6:04 a.m., walking slow, like he always did, his shoulders hunched beneath an oversized windbreaker, the morning paper tucked under one arm. Mr. Donovan, the school's janitor. He moved like a man too tired to care about being noticed, and maybe that was his magic. No one ever looked twice at him. He was invisible. Rachel stood holding Ellie in one arm. Mr. Donovan, she called softly. He didn't jump, just turned, and nodded once. That was all the invitation she needed. They followed him across the lot, down the side of the depot, and into a rusted maintenance door, behind a row of broken vending machines. Inside was a room no bigger than a walk-in closet, lined with old lockers, coats, cleaning supplies, and a rusted desk. Donovan set the paper down. He didn't sit. He didn't offer coffee. He just turned to Rachel and said, said. They've done it again, haven't they? Rachel nodded slowly, clutching Ellie close. You knew. I suspected. They told us the Harmony program was buried, that it was a mistake, a relic. But I've seen too many silent kids this year, too many smiles from teachers that don't blink. He stepped behind a metal cabinet, opened a locked drawer, and pulled out a worn manila folder, edges frayed, stamped, Lindale Initiative, archive copy. He handed it to Rachel. You're not the first to come looking, he said, but you might be the first to make it out. Rachel opened the folder. Inside were decades of records, names, class lists, disciplinary codes, most of it meaningless until she reached the pages marked stimulus response trials. She skimmed the notes. Her stomach turned. Subject 9 did not respond to visual calming protocol. Initiated audio loop. Resistance noted at 2M14 as parental deviation recorded. Child removed for reorientation. Control group siblings separated. Results pending. Donovan lit a cigarette. Didn't smoke it. Just let it burn. They said it was about education, he muttered. Reforming troubled kids. Teaching harmonious interaction. But it was never about the children. It was about control, about silence. And when the grant money ran dry, they buried it, repackaged it, called it the Initiative. Rachel's hands clenched. They took Ellie, she said. Put her in a room with monitors, headphones, other children, and Alice. Donovan's eyes darkened. Alice McCormick, he murmured. I remember her. Bright as a flare, she vanished in 97. They told us she transferred out. I cleaned room 9 the day after. What did you see? He shook his head. Not what I saw. What I heard. Rachel waited. He looked up. They sang. All of them. The same song. Same words. No emotion. Like machines. Ellie stirred in Rachel's arms, as if hearing the words sang triggered something deep. Donovan watched her. She's out, but she's not free. Not yet. Rachel looked up. Then help me finish this. I need proof. More than the map. More than the scar. I need undeniable evidence. Donovan pulled a key from around his neck. Plain brass. No label. This opens the archive beneath the main office. Basement level, behind the old records room. The keycard locks are fake. Everything important is in that vault. Logs, footage, procedures. Things they've hidden for decades. Rachel took the key. I'll get in. No, he said. We'll get in tonight during the fall festival. The school will be crowded, distracted. It's our best shot. Rachel hesitated. And if they catch us? He looked her dead in the eyes. Then we make noise so loud it cracks the damn walls. That night, Lindale, O.T. Elementary shimmered with carnival lights and the smell of kettle corn. Booths lined the sidewalk. Parents laughed. Kids in face paint darted between balloon arches. It looked perfect. It always did. Rachel walked the perimeter with a forced smile, Ellie's hand in hers, Donovan trailing casually, behind with a mop bucket and a yellow vest. At 7:13 p.m., the fireworks began, a distraction scheduled down to the second. They slipped through the side door, down the stairwell, into the dark below. Donovan led her past supply closets and forgotten classrooms until they reached a narrow hallway labeled records. The last door was metal, reinforced. Rachel used the key. The lock clicked, and the door creaked open into a vault of secrets. Inside were shelves of boxes, tapes, documents in faded folders. The air smelled of old paper and something sour, like time had soured everything it touched. Rachel pulled a flashlight from her coat and scanned the labels. Behavioral Oversight Logs, 1993-1999. Harmony Compliance Reports, Stimulus Audits, Parental Interventions. She opened the nearest file. Inside, photos, black and white, faces of children, each with a line under it. Compliance achieved. Resistance observed. Subject removed. Rachel dropped the folder, then froze. At the back of the room, stacked against the wall, was a set of metal cabinets. One drawer was slightly ajar. She opened it. Inside, VHS tapes, labeled by date. She grabbed one. June 17th, 1997. Subject, 12. Emergency override. That was the summer Alice disappeared. Donovan opened his bag and pulled out a portable player. They connected the wires. The tape whirred. The screen blinked. There, on the grainy black and white monitor, was room 9. The desk, the monitors, the spiral, and Alice, strapped to a chair, eyes wide, mouth sewn. Not metaphorically, sewn. Rachel gasped. Ellie whimpered behind her, hiding her face. Donovan reached forward and hit eject. Rachel looked at him. That's it. That's our proof. But before they could move, a sound. Click. The door slammed shut. A figure stood there, face shadowed, then stepped forward into the light. Mrs. Hastings, calm, poised, smiling. You just couldn't leave well enough alone, she said. Rachel backed up. Let us out. I can't do that, Hastings said. Not when you've seen so much. Her eyes flicked to Ellie. She's a strong one. But strong doesn't mean safe. Donovan stepped forward. If you touch them. Hastings raised a small device, pressed a button. The lights went red. The hum returned. Ellie screamed, but Rachel clutched her daughter and shouted, "No more singing!" The room shook. The monitors sparked. And from outside, the sound of fireworks dying down. Everything went silent. Rachel met Hastings' gaze. "You're not going to win." Hastings tilted her head. "I already have. Look at you. You're just one voice, and this town was built to drown it." But Rachel held up the VHS tape. "Not anymore." The vault door slammed again behind them, but this time from the outside. Rachel lunged forward and pounded against it, the thick metal echoing through the chamber. "Let us out!" Silence. No footsteps retreating, no voices. Just the red emergency light pulsing slowly above them like a heartbeat, each flash, casting the room in blood and shadow. Ellie huddled behind one of the filing cabinets, her tiny fingers gripping the portable VHS player like it might shield her. Mr. Donovan stood between them and the door, the crowbar Rachel had brought now gripped in his weathered hands. "Well," he muttered, "at least we know we hit a nerve." Rachel looked down at the VHS tape still clutched in her hand. June 17th, 1997. Subject 12. Emergency override. Alice. The girl no one remembered. The girl they erased. She turned to Donovan. "If we don't get this out of here." "I know," he said. "It goes dark for..." "Good." Rachel took a breath and turned toward the shelves. "Then we find everything. Anything we can carry. Anything with names. With faces. We expose every piece of this program." They moved fast. Donovan found a locked drawer and broke it open with the crowbar. Inside were compact discs, labeled simply Audit 03, Audit 04, Harmony Revisions. Rachel opened a green folder labeled Case Studies Parental Dissonance. Her eyes darted down the page and froze. Subject, Rachel A. Cooper. Dob, 09/28/1987. Initial entry, Harmony Prep, District 3 Behavioral Issues, Distracted Affect, Empathy, Overload, Non-responsive to Compliance Protocol. Recommendation, Reset or Release. Status, Released. Memory modification authorized. Her legs buckled. She had been part of it, not just as a witness, as a subject. They'd tested on her, and when she resisted, they hadn't punished her. They'd erased her. All those years she couldn't remember from second grade. The sudden move, the night terrors, the drawings her mother threw out. It hadn't been childhood stress. It had been a protocol. "Donovan," she whispered, holding out the folder. He skimmed it, his lips pressed into a thin, grim line. "They don't just shape the kids, they shape the mothers." Rachel blinked. "What?" He handed her another file. This one labeled Parental Echo Programming, Phase 2 Implementation. Certain parent types, when modified early, can later be reintroduced as passive agents. The theory suggests they will subconsciously avoid interfering with the system, even when presented with stimuli that should alert them. Successful test subjects show high tolerance for abnormal behavior in their children. Most do not report. Rachel stared at the words, bile rising in her throat. It was never just about Ellie. It was about her, her silence, her ability to look past the early signs. They'd trained her to look away, and she had, for days, until Ellie cried too loud to ignore. A pounding noise ripped through the room, 3 hard thuds against the metal vault. Donovan raised the crowbar, but then a voice called out, muffled but urgent. "Rachel, it's me!" She ran to the door, pressed her ear to the metal. "Who is it?" "Your brother." Relief hit her like a wave. She shouted, "How did you track the GPS ping off your phone? You left it on, and I pulled everything. School grants, quiet, payouts, parent cover-ups. It's all in the cloud now. I've got journalists waiting." Donovan laughed in a dry, shocked sound. "You brought friends." "I brought a fucking war," her brother replied. A mechanical click spun in the door, and it opened. Light poured in. Rachel blinked against it. Ellie, shielded in her arms. Her brother stood there, older, broader, eyes sharp as ever. Behind him, 2 others. One with a handheld camera already filming. Another with a satellite uplink kit blinking green. Rachel didn't ask questions. She just handed him the VHS. "This is Alice." They left through the utility tunnel beneath the gym. By the time they reached the back entrance to the parking lot, police lights flashed in the distance, but not Lindale police. Federal vehicles, 1 SUV, then another. An agent stepped out, tall, black suit, gray streak in his hair. "You're Rachel Cooper?" he asked. She nodded. "You have something to show me?" Rachel looked at her brother, then nodded. He handed the agent a tablet, already synced with files from the vault. As the agent scrolled, his face paled. This is a program." "Yes," Rachel said. "With children." Rachel pointed to Ellie. "With mine." By midnight, the school was under lockdown. Not Hastings lockdown, federal. Rachel sat in the back of the ambulance with Ellie wrapped in a silver thermal blanket, sipping warm juice. She hadn't spoken since room 9, but she was present. Her eyes met her mother's. her hand held tight. Rachel brushed hair from her daughter's brow. "You don't ever have to sing again," she whispered. Ellie blinked, then nodded, just once. Later, Rachel stood outside the school gates and watched Hastings being led away in handcuffs, still in gray, still smiling. "You think this ends me?" Hastings said, turning back toward Rachel. "We're embedded. We're community." Rachel said nothing, just looked her in the eyes, then said very softly, "Consent is revoked," and walked away. Back at home, Rachel found her kitchen lights on. Her brother had unpacked the vault files and spread them across the table. Hundreds of pages, thousands of names. Her brother tapped a folder labeled Harmony Alumni. "Rachel," he said, "some of these kids went on to run for office. Some sit on boards, foundations, think tanks." Rachel closed her eyes. "Of course they did. That was the point. You erase the loud ones. You raise the silent ones. You build the world in their image." "Do you want me to stop?" he asked. She looked at Ellie, sleeping on the couch, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Then she looked at the spiral burned into the wall behind the fridge, the one she hadn't painted over yet. "No," she said. "We start talking, loud, everywhere." The morning after the raid, Rachel Cooper woke to the sound of birdsong. It felt wrong, too peaceful, too normal. She sat up slowly on the couch, the imprint of her daughter's small body still warm beside her. Ellie was curled in a blanket on the other end, eyes open, watching the ceiling, silent, still. Rachel sat up straighter. "Hey, baby," she whispered. Ellie looked at her, but didn't speak. Her gaze was alert now, not blank, not drugged, but cautious, like the quiet might still have ears. Rachel moved closer and took her hand. "You're safe. You're home." Ellie blinked slowly, then whispered, "They said you'd stop looking." Rachel's stomach dropped. "Who said that?" Ellie hesitated, then turned and buried her face in her mother's side. "The knock came just after 9 a.m., Rachel answered, expecting maybe the agents again, or another visit from her brother. Instead, two women in gray coats holding tablets, laminated badges clipped to their shirts. "District Family Services." Rachel's gut twisted. The shorter of the two spoke first, all smiles. "Mrs. Cooper, we're conducting a routine follow-up regarding the reassignment notice issued by the Lyndale Unified District." Rachel stepped forward, blocking the door. "That reassignment was illegal." The taller woman tilted her head. "That's not our determination to make. We're just here to verify conditions in the home, assess Ellie's emotional stability, and complete the file." Rachel's hands clenched. "There is no file." The shorter one smiled again. "There is now." She held up the tablet, Rachel's name on the top, case number, official seal. "Filed under psychological escalation and parental bias indicators," she said. "You'll see that Mrs. Hastings signed the initial submission before the district transition." Rachel swallowed. "Mrs. Hastings is in jail, pending," the woman replied smoothly. "And I," Rachel said, her voice sharp now, "have federal agents and archived evidence proving that my daughter was abducted, psychologically manipulated, and forcibly enrolled in a Black Ops behavioral conditioning program." The two women blinked at her. Then, the taller one tapped her tablet again. "Would you prefer we file for emergency custodial suspension due to non-compliance?" That word again, compliance. Rachel stared them down. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not of uniforms, not of polite smiles. She reached back into the foyer, grabbed the envelope her brother had left that morning, the one labeled Override Orders, Federal Protective Custody, and slapped it against the taller woman's chest. "This is a signed order from the Department of Justice. This child is under federal protection. She doesn't belong to you. She's not yours to file." The women stared. The shorter one blinked twice, her smile finally faltering. Rachel didn't break her stare. "Now leave," she said. They left. Not quickly, not angrily, just silently. But Rachel watched them through the blinds as they walked back to their unmarked car. They didn't drive away. They stayed parked, across the street, watching, waiting, filing. Rachel spent the next 3 hours forwarding every document to the federal contact she'd been assigned. The Harmony files, the names, the video, the footage of Hastings being led away. Every file she sent felt like another brick in the wall, but she knew better than to think bricks would be enough. This thing, this program, it didn't end just because someone got arrested. It morphed, it pivoted, it filed its next step. By noon, her inbox pinged with a new message from the Bureau. We've confirmed previous evidence and witness statements. Official suspension of Lyndale Unified Operations is in process. However, be aware, certain actors in the program were not detained. We suspect alternate sites may be active. More soon. K. Rachel stared at the last line. Alternate sites. They weren't done. That night, Ellie finally spoke again. They were sitting at the table, dinner mostly untouched. Rachel picked up a crayon Ellie had left on the floor and rolled it between her fingers. "What are you thinking about, baby?" Ellie stared at the wall, then softly. There were other doors. In the back, Rachel's pulse quickened. "At the school?" Ellie nodded. "They were locked, but I heard heard them. Other kids, crying, different songs. Rachel leaned closer. How many? Ellie's eyes darkened. I don't know, but it echoed. She emailed her brother. If Lindale was one node, we need to find the others, he replied almost instantly. Already running name traces through Department of Ed, cross-referencing school board members with Harmony alumni. There's a pattern. I think it started as a private sector trial. Then it went rogue. Rachel's mind raced. She thought of the perfect smiles, the photos on the wall at school, the spiral symbols embedded in toys, in posters, in stickers on fruit. It wasn't just Lindale. It had never been just Lindale. And now they were reeling, but not gone. Not by a long shot. Later that evening, a package arrived. No return label. Rachel opened it on the porch light casting long shadows across the steps. Inside, a small paper notebook, black cover. Inside, on the first page, handwritten in looping cursive, Parental Conditioning Handbook, Revised Protocol. Rachel flipped through it, her stomach churning. The notes weren't printed, they were copied, repeated, page after page of silent instructions. Respond with calm, accept blame, reframe discomfort as growth, remove memory triggers, realign, smile. At the bottom of every page, a hand-drawn spiral. Rachel stood frozen. The notebook fell to the ground. Ellie appeared in the doorway, and for the first time since that night, her voice was clear, steady. Mommy? Rachel turned. Yes, baby? I don't want to be quiet anymore. Rachel walked to her, knelt down, took her hand. You won't have to, she said. Not ever again. And as they stood together under the porch light behind them, across the street, the gray car finally drove away. But not before Rachel took its license plate down. She would file that too, because this time, it was her turn to do the watching. It was sometime after midnight, when Ellie woke up screaming, not loud, no shrieking, no thrashing, just one long, muffled sob, like she'd remembered something her mind had buried too deep and too dark. Rachel was beside her in seconds. She scooped her daughter into her arms, whispering, It's okay, baby, I'm here, you're safe. But Ellie shook her head violently. No, she's not safe, she's still there. Rachel blinked. Who, sweetheart? Ellie pulled away just enough to look at her, eyes wide, terrified, but sharp, awake. The other girl. Rachel felt the world tilt. You mean Alice? Ellie shook her head again. Another girl. One they left. Not Alice. She had curly hair and glasses. They didn't mean to leave her, but they forgot. Rachel's voice dropped to a whisper. You saw her. She never talks, just stares. I think she saw everything. Rachel reached for the notebook and flipped to the last map Ellie had drawn. Can you show me where? Ellie picked up a crayon, violet her favorite, and slowly circled a blank space just behind room 9. It wasn't on any blueprint. It wasn't even a room. It was a closet. She's in the wall, Ellie whispered. Behind the files. I saw her looking out once. Rachel's hand trembled. Ellie, are you saying she's alive? Ellie nodded slowly. Then we're going back. By morning, Rachel had called June, the other mother, the one who had warned her months ago. You don't want to make noise here in Lindale. She hadn't spoken since. Until now. June arrived at the back. Doctor at 7:43 a.m. No words. She just walked in, dropped her purse, and said, Tell me everything. Rachel laid it out. The vault, room 9, the map, the tapes, Hastings, the raids, the agents, the car across the street. The girl Ellie swore was still inside. June listened in silence, her expression, unreadable. Then, I used to work in records. Rachel blinked. Before my son started here, June continued. Before I stopped asking questions, there were always missing documents, blacklists, pages marked redacted. I thought it was just bureaucratic nonsense. She leaned in. But I remember a door, that never opened. A closet behind the server wall. Once I saw someone enter it with a code and come out pale, sick. They never talked about it. Rachel stared. Do you know the code? June took a deep breath, then nodded. They entered the school grounds through the loading dock. The same way. Donovan had shown Rachel weeks ago. The fall festival had left a skeleton crew behind. And now, with the federal lockdown lifting slowly for inspection, not many people questioned two determined-looking women with lanyards. June led the way through the South Hall. Every light felt too bright. Every silence too deliberate. When they reached the records floor, June paused by a blank wall panel. It's here. She pressed her palm to the seam and whispered, 9047. A soft click echoed. A hidden lock disengaged. A panel slid open. Inside, a narrow passage barely lit, dusty with the stale scent of trapped air and forgotten time. Rachel turned on her flashlight. They stepped in together. The walls were lined with insulation and old wire tracks, thick with spider webs. And then, at the far end, opened. A door, no handle, no name, just paint peeling in quiet decay. June ran her hand along the edge. There's another latch here, she pressed. The door creaked open. Rachel lifted her light. What they saw froze them in place. A tiny room, no bigger than a broom closet. Blank walls, a chair, a mattress, a bucket, and in the corner, curled so tightly she barely looked human, a girl, still, breathing, awake, watching. Rachel stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Sweetheart, what's your name?" The girl didn't answer. Her eyes followed the light. Wide, wild, alive. June whispered, "She's been here the whole time." Rachel knelt slowly, held up her hands. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to get you out." A flicker, a breath. The girl's mouth opened slightly, dry, cracked. She whispered something so faint it nearly disappeared. "Sing when the light." Rachel shook her head gently. "No more singing, baby. That's over. That's done." The girl blinked, then fainted. They carried her out wrapped in a utility blanket. Faces blank, movements swift. June whispered something to a maintenance man who was too stunned to ask questions. Outside, Rachel called the agent she trusted. "Kay, we found another." By nightfall, the girl had been transported to a pediatric trauma unit 2 counties away. No name, no ID, but on the back of her neck, a spiral, barely healed, carved. Donovan met Rachel in the parking lot. When he saw the child being lifted from the van, he turned away and cursed under his breath. "How many more?" he asked. Rachel looked down at her hands. "I don't know." "Then we keep going," he said. Rachel nodded. That night, Rachel tucked Ellie into bed and sat beside her for a long time. Her daughter was quiet again, but not the same silence as before. This one was peaceful. She clutched a new stuffed rabbit, a gift from the hospital. Her eyes didn't flick toward shadows anymore, but just as Rachel stood to leave the room, Ellie whispered, "She saw everything, Mom." Rachel turned. Ellie's eyes were wide again. "The girl in the closet. She saw the first one." Rachel sat back down slowly. "The first what?" Ellie turned over, her voice a murmur. "The first spiral." Rachel sat in the dark after that, the word echoing through her mind. The first spiral. Not a mark, not a logo, a beginning, a seed. And whoever planted it hadn't finished their work yet. Rachel stood over the folding table in her brother's garage, a single overhead bulb, casting sharp shadows over the spread of blueprints, folders, and photographs. Every square foot of Lyndale Elementary was mapped out, not the official plans, but the real ones, dug up by June and reconstructed with Donovan's decades of memory. She ran her hand over the newest edition, a print of the server room schematics with a narrow channel marked in red, one that led straight into the sub-basement archives, the closet where they'd found the girl, and just behind it, a hatch labeled MWS, Maintenance Wiring Substation. The term meant nothing at first, but her brother hunched over. An old terminal nearby had looked up when he saw it. "That's not electrical," he said. "That's coded." "For what?" He turned the screen toward her, and there it was, a buried file, deep in an old procurement log from 1992. MWS stood for Memory Wipe Station. Rachel had nearly vomited. Now, 2 days later, the plan was in place. They would go in during the annual district board gala, held right in the school's courtyard under glowing lights and catered buffet tables. Every major figure in the program would be on site, including officials who had been just slippery enough to avoid indictment. That was the key. Hastings may have been taken down, but the structure remained. Protected, denied, rebranded. They needed more than emotional testimony and eerie tapes. They needed live evidence. Something that couldn't be buried, manipulated, or explained away. So Rachel, Donovan, and June decided to do what no parent, teacher, or agent had dared. They would live stream Room 9. Everything. The children, the chamber, the machines, the ones who came in when the lights went off. The 3 of them stood in the garage like old soldiers preparing for battle. Donovan loaded a duffel bag with tools, crowbar, bolt cutters, infrared camera, handheld transmitter. June checked the feeds on her tablet. "We have 2 live stream relays ready. One satellite linked, one local backup. If they cut one, the other pushes to the public archive." Rachel nodded, but her hands shook slightly as she checked the wiring diagram again. It was simple in theory. Enter through the back fence during the gala chaos. Bypass the maintenance hatch using Donovan's keycard. Access the wiring substation and plug the portable livestream kit into the hardline. Broadcast everything, not just to the feds, to everyone. That evening, Rachel kissed Ellie on the forehead and said something she hadn't in days. "I'll be back before you wake up." Ellie looked up at her, no longer scared, no longer lost, just steady. Do they know? She asked softly. Rachel paused. Know what, baby? That you're not like before. Rachel blinked. Before? Ellie smiled faintly. When you forgot. Rachel knelt, hugging her close. I'll never forget again. 7:41 p.m. The school buzzed with gala music and the clinking of wine glasses. String lights strung between flagpoles. Tablecloths too crisp, smiles too wide. Rachel and June slipped past the east wing as Donovan disabled the security relay in the hallway. No alarms, no noise. Inside the dark, narrow corridor, Rachel's heart pounded in her ears. They reached the sub-basement in 5 minutes. Donovan jimmied the hatch open and lowered them down one at a time. The air was dry, still, smelled like old heat and dust and iron. They followed the map. When they reached the MWS station, Rachel froze. It was nothing like a utility hub. It looked like a confessional, a small, soundproof chamber with wires feeding from the ceiling and a single padded chair bolted to the floor. Above it, a headset, still powered, still humming. Donovan cursed under his breath. It's still active. Rachel pulled the cover off the junction box in the corner and plugged in the live stream relay. The transmitter blinked green. June's tablet buzzed. We're live. Donovan swung the infrared camera around. The chamber lit up in crisp, bone-white light. He whispered, "You want truth? Here it is." And then Rachel whispered, "Wait," because on the wall behind the chair, in perfect rows, were names, handwritten, in charcoal, dozens, maybe hundreds, and next to each one either A or an X. Rachel stepped closer. One name caught her eye, Alice M. She kept scanning until she found it. Ellie Cooper, no mark yet. A tremble rocked through her. They hadn't finished with her. Ellie was still on the ledger, still part of their plan. Rachel spun. We're taking this whole room, not just video. We take the names, we take the systems, we take the machine. Donovan nodded and began feeding the footage directly to the upload array. That's when they heard it. Footsteps. Above. Fast. Heavy. They'd been spotted. June checked the signal. Still live. 30 seconds to full. Mirror sync. The hatch slammed open. Voices. Distant but angry. They're in the basement. Rachel grabbed the camera. Donovan ripped the chair wires from the wall. June yanked the portable drive from the panel. They ran. Back through the tunnel. Through the insulation. One light flickered and died. As they passed, behind them, boots. Rachel reached the outer door, shoved it open, and there, standing in the courtyard, beneath the white tent lights and the glittering party, was Hastings, free, her hair down, no handcuffs, surrounded by board members and a photographer snapping shots. Rachel froze. Their eyes met. Hastings smiled, just like always. Too wide, too calm, too much. But this time Rachel didn't freeze. She raised the camera, aimed it straight at Hastings, and pressed broadcast, right to the crowd, right to the live stream, right to every open laptop and phone synced to the relay. The footage played. The chair, the humming, the spiral, the names, Ellie's name. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Screams. Someone dropped a wine glass. Hastings didn't move. She just tilted her head and said very clearly, "You think truth will stop them?" Rachel's voice was ice. No, but now everyone knows it. 3 days later, every board member seen in the footage resigned. Federal charges were filed. The school was closed. And Rachel received a call from a woman in D.C., a mother, a Harmony survivor, and she said 5 words. I have a list too. Rachel sat in the back seat of a government SUV, the old crowbar across her lap and Ellie's map clutched in her hands. The building in front of her wasn't Lindale Elementary. It wasn't even in Lindale. This was miles out, past the county line, past the reach of school boards and false reassignment forms. This place had no signage, no playground, just a windowless structure set deep behind a chain-link fence wrapped in barbed wire. They called it Site 3, but Ellie, staring through the tinted glass, whispered something different. That's the room. Rachel turned to her. You're sure? Ellie nodded. I saw it in the picture, behind the desk. It's where the singing started. Rachel's stomach turned. A federal agent leaned in from the front seat. You don't have to do this, he said. We can run the sweep ourselves. Take it from here. But Rachel shook her head. They'll clean it, sterilize it, file it under unsanctioned legacy structure, and call it handled. She looked back at the door. But this was my story before it was theirs. She stepped out. The front door opened with a key they'd pulled from Hastings' purse the night of the gala. The building's interior was as lifeless as its shell. White walls, gray tile, not even dust to suggest time had passed. Rachel walked slowly down the main hallway. The only sounds was the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the scuff of her boots against tile. She paused at the second corridor, turned left, stopped in front of an unmarked door. No knob, no keypad, just a thin slit of black where the panels met. "This is it," she said. The agent beside her pulled out a multi-tool and wedged the panel open. The metal shrieked in protest. Behind it, a dark staircase. Descending, Rachel went first. They reached the bottom after 33 steps. The floor was smooth concrete, the walls insulated but covered in faint impressions. Rachel raised her flashlight. Dozens of spirals, some etched deep, some scribbled like a child's nervous scrawl. Ellie grabbed her hand. Rachel squeezed it. "You don't have to come further." But Ellie shook her head. "She's waiting." Rachel led them forward. The hallway narrowed until it opened into a chamber the size of a gymnasium, and there, at its center, sat the room with no name. It wasn't a room in the architectural sense. It was a structure within the structure. Padded walls, soundproofing tiles, surveillance domes on every corner, a high chair in the middle surrounded by folding partitions, and speakers, old, boxy, and humming faintly even now. Rachel stepped inside. The sound changed. Not louder, but closer. She turned a full circle, and then she saw it, a steel cabinet bolted into the far wall. She approached, opened it. Inside were reels of tape, dozens, handwritten labels. Harmony Trial 0001, live subject, Rachel A. Cooper. Trial 002, subject 9, audio non-compliant. Trial 003, observer, Alice M. R. Directive Override. Trial 004, subject LO, did not reset, held over. Rachel pulled out Trial 0001, her own tape. She stared at the reel, her name scrawled across the edge, in someone else's handwriting. She dropped to her knees. Ellie knelt beside her. "Is that you?" Rachel nodded, her voice breaking. "They erased me here." And then from the far side of the chamber came a sound. A door creaking open. Everyone spun. A shape stepped into the chamber, thin, small. It was the girl, the one they left. The girl with the curly hair and the glasses. Older now, but unmistakable. She walked in slowly, barefoot, her eyes wide but not lost. Rachel stood. "Alice?" The girl flinched. Ellie shook her head. "No, not Alice. She's the other one." Rachel stepped forward. "What's your name?" The girl opened her mouth, tried, but no sound came. She tapped her chest, then pointed to a line of tally marks on the wall. Rachel looked closer. There were 37, carved with a nail or a wire. The girl pointed again, then pressed a hand to the tape reels, and finally tapped her own forehead. "She remembers them all," Ellie whispered. Rachel dropped to her knees. "She's a recorder," Rachel said softly. "A living archive. They kept her here because she didn't forget." The girl smiled. Not a real smile, but something raw, human, defiant. Rachel stood slowly. "We're going to get you out of here." But the girl didn't move. Instead, she stepped back, pressed her palm to the center wall, and a panel slid open. Inside was a hidden space, with 6 more children, sleeping, drugged, some bound, some whispering. Rachel screamed for the agents. They swarmed in, radios flaring, emergency calls flying. But she didn't leave. She walked into the room, lifted each child in turn, whispered, "You're free now," until all 6 were safe. Until the girl with the glasses stood at her side and pointed to the final corner, a box. Rachel opened it. Inside, birth certificates, photos, IDs, and a list. A list of names she'd seen before, on the board, on the gala guest list, on the alumni reports, on campaign posters. She turned to the agent. "Get this to every media outlet you can. Every parent, every teacher, every town that thought they were safe." The agent nodded. Rachel looked back one last time at the room, the chair, the wires, the children now blinking under real light, and said, "Burn it." That night, Rachel stood outside as flames. Consumed Site 3. She held Ellie on her hip. The girl with the glasses stood beside them, arms wrapped in a blanket, her eyes reflecting orange. No one spoke. No one sang. Only the fire. And for the first time since the spiral appeared, the air felt clean. 3 days after the fire, Rachel found herself standing in a government office, fluorescent lights humming above, the air thick with disinfectant and years of bureaucracy. Across from her sat Agent Keller, sleeves rolled up, hair undone, his eyes bleary from lack of sleep, but he was smiling. Not the empty Lindale smile, a real one. "She hasn't said a word," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "But she hasn't run either." Rachel opened the file. Inside, a photo of the girl with glasses, the one they'd found in the room with no name, the recorder. She was sitting in a chair, knees tucked under her chin, arms wrapped tight around herself, but her eyes were different now. They weren't blank. They were watching. She keeps drawing, Keller added. Won't touch food unless it's round. Won't sleep unless the lights are on. But she draws, always in the same corner of the room. Rachel stared at the image for a long moment. What's the room like? Blank. Safe. Quiet. Rachel shook her head. It won't be quiet for her. Not in the ways that matter. Keller leaned forward. We can keep her secure, monitored, evaluated. No, Rachel said softly. You need to listen to her. He frowned. We don't even know her name. Rachel met his eyes. You don't need her name. You need her story. That evening, Rachel returned to the recovery center. The building was quiet, an old converted convent outside the county line. Warm, sunlit rooms, real curtains, soft blankets. And in room 3B, the girl in the corner, she was sitting cross-legged on the floor, her back to the door, sketching in charcoal. Rachel didn't speak right away. She sat on the rug, slowly, leaving space between them. After a while, she said, I know you've seen a lot, more than anyone should, but I want to know what you remember, not just what. They made you watch. The girl didn't stop drawing, but she reached forward, picked up another page from the stack and slid it across the rug. Rachel picked it up. It was a diagram, not just a spiral, but a mechanism, a machine with wires and sensors and screens. The same one Rachel had seen in room 9, but drawn from memory. Every bolt, every circuit, even the wiring code. You built this? Rachel whispered. The girl finally looked up, shook her head once, then tapped the corner of the paper. In tiny, careful letters, the name, Marlena. Rachel smiled. Is that your name? The girl shook her head again, then pointed to the blueprint. That was its name, not hers. Rachel blinked back tears. You don't remember your name? The girl tilted her head, then pointed to her own sketch, one in the stack near the bottom. Rachel pulled it out. It was her, Rachel, drawn in soft pencil. Eyes alert, mouth tense, standing in the vault holding Ellie's hand. She looked over at the girl. You remember me? The girl nodded, then slid another page. This one was different, not mechanical, not a spiral. It was a child's bedroom. Pink curtains, a bookshelf, a worn rug, and 3 people. A man, a woman, a girl, maybe 5 or 6, and with curly hair and round glasses. The girl pointed to the child in the drawing, then tapped her own chest. That was her. That was before. Rachel's voice cracked. You remember your home. The girl, the one whose name no one had spoken in over a decade, nodded once and whispered her first word since being found. Sam. Rachel's breath caught. It wasn't her name. It was a plea, a fragment, a memory. Later that night, Rachel walked into her own kitchen and found Ellie on the floor, surrounded by construction paper and markers. Are you making a picture, Sweet Pea? Ellie nodded, then held it up. It was a picture of their house, but behind it a girl was standing under the tree in their backyard, small, wearing glasses. Rachel knelt down. Is that? She's watching, Ellie whispered, not scared anymore. Rachel wrapped her arms around her. Daughter, she doesn't have to be scared. The next morning, Rachel sat down with Agent Keller and made her case. She can't go into the system, not after what they did. She needs a home, a real one. Keller leaned back. You're already fighting a war, Rachel, and you're raising Ellie. She saved Ellie, Rachel said. That girl, she didn't just survive, she remembered, she preserved, and she needs someone who believes her story isn't over. Keller stared at her for a long moment, then handed her a form. 1 week later, the girl in the corner had a new room, a real one, with windows, curtains, a rabbit lamp that matched Ellie's. She stood in the doorway the first night, barefoot on the rug, fingers twitching at her side. Rachel knelt down. You don't have to draw anymore if you don't want to, but if you do, I'll keep every page. Deal? The girl looked at her, and then, for the first time, smiled. Not wide, not perfect, just real. Do you want to pick a name? Rachel asked softly. The girl thought for a moment, then whispered, Call me Nora. Rachel smiled. Welcome home, Nora. That night, Rachel found one more drawing tucked under her pillow. It was of 3 figures, a woman and 2 girls holding hands. In the background, a shadowy spiral, not glowing, just fading. The message written in small block letters beneath, no more singing, no more silence, not here. The email came at 2:08 a.m., no subject line, just a single link. Rachel sat up in bed, rubbed the sleep from her eyes, and clicked it. A private stream, unlisted, hosted through a mirror site, barebones interface. The footage was silent, grainy, but she recognized the location instantly. Site 3, what was left of it, or rather, what was being done to it. Rachel leaned forward as the screen flared with flame. They were burning it, all of it. A pile of reels, file cabinets, even the padded chair from the room with no name, set ablaze in a controlled burn. She could make out the silhouettes of men in uniforms, standing at a safe distance, clipboards in hand, smiling, watching. She reached for her phone and texted her brother. They're erasing it. it. Everything. Tonight, he replied instantly. I'm on it. Screen capping. Saving frame by frame. We'll make this louder than they ever planned. But Rachel's gut told her the fire wasn't just literal. It was a signal. The next day, the news cycle was already being rewritten. The headlines were subtle. Former Harmony site deemed unsafe, decommissioned. Federal report labels program a localized error. Legacy infrastructure misused by rogue individuals, says board. No mention of the tapes, no mention of the children, and no mention of Ellie, or Nora, or Alice. Rachel watched from her living room couch as a polished woman in a navy blazer appeared on screen. The Harmony Initiative, the anchor said, has been officially closed. Though investigators found procedural errors, there is currently no evidence of systemic abuse or intentional harm. No charges will be filed. Ellie sat next to her, silent. Rachel muted the television and wept. The real blow came 2 days later. A letter in the mail, hand-delivered. No stamp, no sender. Inside, legal paperwork. Margaret Hastings vs. Rachel A. Cooper. Claim, defamation, destruction of public property, coercion of a minor, and conspiracy to interfere with a state-sanctioned educational reform program. Rachel stared at the signature. Hastings, not behind bars, not silenced, rebranded, now serving as a consultant for cognitive development with a private research firm. A note was paperclip to the top. Your obsession has made you dangerous. Step back or we burn more than files. We'll burn your custody. Rachel met with Agent Keller that afternoon in a diner off Highway 4. She slid the letter across the table. He read it without blinking, then tore it in half. You're not losing her, he said. We've seen everything. We have your side. But that's not what they're showing, Rachel said. They're already rebuilding it. Maybe not in Lindale. Maybe not under the name Harmony. But it's not over. Keller nodded, then slid her a flash drive. What's this? The files. We didn't burn. Rachel looked up, stunned. You kept them? No. You did. We just made sure no one found them. Inside were copies of every document, every photo, every taped session, even Rachel's own file from when she was a child. You're not just a witness, Rachel, Keller said. You're the case. She left the diner with a plan. That night, she sat down with her brother and built a website. Not flashy, just one title. WeRememberThem.org. They uploaded the files one by one. Every name, every voice, every drawing Ellie and Nora had ever made. Rachel wrote the homepage herself. They told us to be quiet, to sing when the lights went out, but we're done singing, and we will not forget. But the retaliation came fast. Rachel was fired from her nursing job, not for negligence, not for anything real, just disruptive behavior in the workplace. The day after, her car was keyed with a spiral etched across the driver's side door. When she picked up groceries, the cashier whispered, "Why don't you just leave it alone?" That night, someone left a dead rabbit on her porch. Its throat was marked with a perfect spiral. Ellie didn't cry. She simply picked it up with gloved hands and buried it in the yard. Rachel watched her and realized her daughter had been taught how to mourn things others refused to acknowledge. Later that week, Nora spoke her second full sentence. Rachel found her sitting on the floor, building something out of toothpicks and glue. She looked up and whispered, "They'll come again." Rachel crouched. When? Nora's eyes were far away. When people forget. Rachel nodded slowly. Then we won't let them. But even as she said it, she knew they'd already started again, in another county, with a new name, new teachers, same spiral. Rachel watched. The news the next morning. A story about a cutting-edge emotional development pilot program being introduced in a new district. Silent classrooms, humming machines, children instructed to model gratitude through song. She turned off the TV, held Ellie close, and whispered, "They'll never take you again," then walked into her office and clicked upload. Every document, every minute of footage, all of it. She stared at the screen as the progress bar filled. When it hit 100%, she whispered, "This time, the fire's ours." It started with a voicemail. Rachel had just gotten home from the courthouse. Another delay, another legal sidestep by Hastings' lawyers. Ellie was at Nora's art therapy session, and the house felt too quiet. The kind of quiet that used to feel like a threat. She set her keys down and checked her phone. One missed call, unknown number, and one voicemail. She played it. The voice was gravelly, older, worn, but clear. "Name's Harold Miles, retired field agent, FBI. My granddaughter disappeared in '96 from a Harmony charter in Detroit. Never got her back. But I saw your site, watched the tapes, heard your daughter's voice. I believe you. You're not alone anymore. Check your inbox." Rachel didn't move for a second. Her body went cold. Then she ran to her laptop, logged in. Her inbox was exploding. Hundreds of messages. Subject lines like, "My child said the same words. I thought I was crazy. I recognize that room." And one from Harold Miles himself. Inside was a detailed report, 6 pages of analysis cross-referencing Harmony files with missing child reports, relocation data, district grant applications, and sealed court records. He'd found patterns, not in Lindale, but in Ohio, Virginia, Oregon, each time under a new name, always under the umbrella of behavioral recalibration. Rachel scrolled, shaking. Attached at the bottom, a PDF. Formal petition to reopen federal investigation. Harmony trials. Signed by Harold Miles. Co-signed by 4 other former federal investigators. 2 days later, the world changed. Rachel's phone buzzed nonstop. News alerts. Social media explosions. It had begun to spread. We Remember Them was trending. Ellie's drawing of the room with no name, the one with the children seated in silence, had gone viral. Millions of shares, thousands of comments. And then came the interview. Harold Miles appeared on national television, seated calmly, an old badge on the table between him and the interviewer. "I buried this for years," he said. "But when I saw Rachel Cooper's daughter on that live stream, repeating the same phrases we documented in the 90s, I knew they'd started again." The host asked, "Do you believe it was intentional?" Harold looked straight at the camera. "I believe it was systematic." Rachel stood in her living room staring at the screen, tears running down her face. She wasn't screaming anymore. She wasn't hiding. She was seen. A week later, Lindale Elementary was shut down permanently. The town board resigned. Federal agents arrived with full jurisdiction and opened sealed archives, evidence rooms, even homes of former staff. What they found made the front page. Dozens of children, undocumented, unregistered, trafficked between trial sites, audio logs, confirming behavioral tampering and pharmaceutical testing, training manuals for parental disruption management, manuals that taught how to discredit, intimidate, and isolate mothers who asked too many questions. Rachel sat with Ellie and Nora on the couch, watching it all unfold. And for the first time, her girls weren't afraid of the television. They were watching the world listen. 3 days after the broadcast, Rachel received an invitation, a congressional committee, testimony request. Witness, Rachel A. Cooper. Subject, psychological conditioning and educational abuse in federally funded institutions. She brought Ellie, not because she needed proof, because Ellie wanted to go. The room was full. Cameras, senators, journalists, rows of survivors behind her, some mothers, some grown children who had once sat in chairs like the one in room 9. Rachel took a breath and began. "My daughter was 7 when she started to forget how to speak. She came home with burns that no doctor would name. She drew spirals on the wall and whispered about a room where children had to sing when the lights went out. I was told I was imagining things, that I was unstable, that I should be grateful, but I wasn't imagining it, and I wasn't the first." She paused. The room was silent. Then Ellie stood beside her. No script, no prompting. She held up her old drawing, the one with the chair in the center of the spiral. "I remember this room," Ellie said softly, "but it doesn't scare me anymore, because now you all know it's real." The chairwoman of the committee wiped her eyes. "I don't think we'll forget." That night, Rachel sat with her brother on the back porch. The sky above was clean and dark, and for once, she didn't feel like the shadows were watching her. "You think it's really over?" he asked. Rachel took a sip of coffee. "No," he nodded. "You gonna keep fighting?" She looked toward the window where Ellie and Nora were drawing side by side under a lamp. Nora was sketching a tree with children climbing it. Ellie was drawing clouds, not spirals. Rachel smiled. "I think the next generation just got their voices back." At 2:12 a.m., Rachel received one more message. Anonymous. Just a photograph. A school hallway. Faint spirals in the tile. Captioned, "We moved." But the room still looked the same. Rachel stared at it and whispered, "Then we're not done." The sign at the edge of town used to read, "Welcome to Lindale, a community of harmony now." It was gone. Not painted over, not vandalized. Removed. A hollow frame where identity used to be. Rachel stood on the shoulder of the road, Ellie beside her, both of them staring at the bare metal. "Do you think they'll put a new name up?" Ellie asked. Rachel kept her eyes forward. "No, I think they want to disappear." She looked down the road toward the center of town, where the school once stood. Only the foundation remained now, ringed in caution tape and chain-link fencing. Grass had begun to grow in the cracks of the old basketball court. The walls had been reduced to rubble. Even the spiral emblazoned banners that once lined the street lamps were gone. Lindale wasn't just quiet. It was hollow, as if the soul had been scooped out of it, and maybe it had. The town tried to rebuild in the way small towns do, with denial and pretty banners. The mayor gave a press conference calling the Harmony program a shameful aberration. Local pastors held community prayer vigils. Businesses posted signs saying "We stand with our children." But Rachel didn't go. Neither did June, or Donovan, or the other parents who now gathered quietly at the cafe down the street from the old district office. What they called the Circle now, a soft reference that that needed no explanation. They met every Thursday. No podiums, no microphones, just coffee. Stories, drawings, some came to speak, some came just to eek. Listen. One woman brought a notebook of her son's old scribbles, spirals pressed so hard the paper tore. Another man shared an audio clip he'd recorded in 2001. A girl humming alone in her bedroom, the same three-note chant Rachel had first heard from Ellie. And through it all, Rachel sat with her. Girls. Ellie now spoke freely but carefully, measuring every word, not because she was afraid, but because she wanted to be heard. Nora didn't speak often, but she drew. One day she handed Rachel a drawing without saying a word. It was the town square, but instead of buildings, the center was filled with people, mothers, fathers, children, all holding candles, all facing the same direction. The caption, "They see us now." A few weeks later, Rachel received another letter. This time, it wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. Washington, D.C., public recognition ceremony, survivors of behavioral harm initiatives. The envelope was thick. Inside, tickets, one for Rachel, one for Ellie, one for Nora. She read the card at the bottom. For those who screamed and weren't believed, for those who whispered and were erased, for those who never stopped digging. Ellie looked at the invitation, then at Rachel. "Are we really going?" Rachel nodded. "We are." Nora, standing in the doorway, tapped her pencil against the doorframe and said quietly, "Will there be cameras?" Rachel smiled. "Yes, but only if you want to be seen." Nora stared for a moment, then said, "This time, I do." On the day they left, the entire cafe circle came to the curb to wave them off. Donovan handed Rachel a small wooden box. Inside, a charred piece of concrete. "The cornerstone from room 9, he said. "Pulled it before the demolition team arrived." Rachel ran her fingers across the rough spiral etched into it. "It's proof," he added. Rachel shook her head. "No, it's a grave marker." The ceremony in D.C. was held on the Capitol steps. There were speakers, music, moments of silence. But the moment that mattered most came after it all, when Ellie stood at the podium, next to a microphone nearly as tall as she was, and said clearly, "They thought we'd forget, but we didn't. We told, and you listened, and that's why we're still here." Thunderous applause followed, but Ellie just stepped back and held Rachel's hand, then Nora's, and for a brief second on that massive lawn surrounded by monuments and news crews and strangers from all over the country, Rachel looked into her daughter's faces and felt peace. Not because justice had been served, not because it was over, but because it had begun. The flight home was quiet. Ellie slept. Nora watched clouds out the window. Rachel sat, with her hand over her heart, the box with the spiral stone tucked into her bag below. The pilot announced their descent. She glanced out the window at the fields below, green with new spring. The town would still be there, but the name was gone. And maybe that was justice too, because towns like that didn't deserve a name until they'd earned one, until they'd remembered what they forgot. Rachel whispered, "Goodbye, Lindale," and turned to the sunrise. Spring melted quietly into early summer. The air in Rachel's backyard was sweet with honeysuckle. Birds returned to the oak tree, and the sounds of life, real life, filled the world that had once been too quiet. Ellie was lying on a picnic blanket beneath the branches, sketchbook propped on her knees. Nora sat beside her, legs crossed, a small set of colored pencils lined neatly in rows. Rachel watched them from the porch, a mug of tea in her hands, the heat rising gently between her fingers. It was the kind of morning people once told her she might never have again, but she did. She fought for it, and she had it. A letter arrived that afternoon, a simple envelope, no return address. Rachel opened it slowly, instinct, still warning her after everything. Inside, a folded piece of paper, one sentence typed in the center, "We know where you live. That's the difference." Rachel stared at it for a long moment, then smiled, because for once it wasn't a threat, it was a whimper, the last flicker of a fire already drowned. Light. She tore the paper once, twice, then let the wind take it. Later, while Rachel made dinner, Ellie came into the kitchen. "Mom," she said softly, holding out her sketchbook, "I want you to have this." Rachel dried her hands and took it. On the page was a drawing, brighter, bolder than anything Ellie had drawn before. It was their house, the yard, the big oak tree, and beneath it, Rachel, Ellie, and Nora, all holding hands. Behind them, the old school burned in vivid reds and oranges. A spiral of smoke rose, but not dark. It was colored in soft blue, peaceful, gentle, just a swirl. Beneath it, Ellie had written, "This time it's just a swirl, nothing more." Rachel's throat tightened. She knelt, pulled Ellie into a hug. Then Nora joined them. The three of them stayed there, on the kitchen floor, wrapped in something wordless and warm, something stronger than fear. That night, Rachel stepped outside before bed. The moon was full and quiet. She glanced back at the house, one light still glowing from the girls' room. She turned to the side of the house. to the patch of wall where Ellie once drew her first spiral. She hadn't touched it in months, but there it was. Now, drawn again, in soft blue chalk, a single swirl. Rachel laughed quietly, then whispered, "Yeah, baby. This time, it's just a swirl." She turned off the porch light and walked back inside. The house held the warmth of 3 lives healing, and no one would ever silence them again.